got 25 minutes. We gotta go.
Hey you.
Hey everyone, happy Wednesday. It is another Wednesday on Say That channel. My name is Janelle Villiers. That over there is Winston Broderick, and we are your co-hosts, where we are unapologetic about talking about the ugly come up of entrepreneurship. So you know how you hear those stories about people who start from nothing and then all of a sudden they have massive success. But what happens in the middle? What happens during the ugly come up? What's the mindset you need to have? What the challenges you need to circumvent? That is what we're here to talk about right here. And so we're really excited to have you on. We love having guests on to answer our questions of the day or the topic questions of the day. However, we only have 25 minutes to answer them. So what happens when we run out of time? Oh no. Go join us on Patreon. All of our Patreon members get access to all of our guests and overtime, where we go a little bit deeper into some of the topics that we've been talking about. And as a Patreon member, you get access to all of the recordings from all of our other guests. There is a treasure trove.
Trevor.
Treasure trove.
Someone has Trevor Noah in the mind, guys. If anyone knows Janelle, yeah.
It's a treasure trove of insight and wisdom that you can tap into as an entrepreneur. So we're really excited to have you on. If you are watching us for the first time, please go ahead and put a 1 in the comments. We'd love to shout you out. If you are a regular Say That Nation member, please go ahead and put a 2 in the chat. We always love to shout you out as well.
Say that. All right, let's jump into the topic of the day.
Could your business be missing out by not being on podcasts? What a great question. Well, I am really excited because today we have a guest who is the perfect person to answer today's question. She is a wife. She is the co-owner of a company that helps people do just that, get on podcasts. Like, believe me, of all the people that you want to hear answer this question, she is the one. Everyone, please help me welcome from all the way from Cyprus, Noemi Beres.
Our next guest.
Hey, there she is.
Welcome in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely.
Yes, we're so excited to have you. And for those that are meeting you for the first time, tell us a little bit about how you got into entrepreneurship and eventually became the co-owner of your company.
Sure. I mean, that's going to be a long story. So I became an entrepreneur in 2007. And that time, together with my husband, we lived in Ireland. And I just graduated back in 2004. I have a master's degree in Scandinavian linguistics. I speak Danish and Swedish. And first, we wanted to move to Denmark, but that didn't work out. So we ended up in Ireland. And I ended up working in a call center for 3 years because of the my language is, Swedish, Danish. So I would say it was fun because we had so many young people around from different European countries, just freshly graduated. So we partied along and it was fun, but I didn't want to stay there forever. And one day I just told my husband, so I want to become an entrepreneur. And that was back in 2007. And I never looked back. So I just left my job and okay, let's do this. And so first we had an online travel related business. We were the first car rental brokers for online, like this completely virtual remote job company for Hungarian customers who travel abroad. We were like a middleman between the car hire companies and the client.
Yeah.
So, and we did that business basically up till 2020 when the pandemic hit and the whole travel industry basically just stopped from one day to another. Boom. Yeah, that was it. And then we had to pivot. We had to find something else. And luckily, we had a mentor, an Irish guy, who helped us to basically to establish our company, Podcast Connections, and how to run a podcast booking agency. I haven't even listened to podcasts before 2020. So I know nothing about it. So I was just, and there are still many friends out there in Europe that they have no idea what I'm doing. So they were just like,
Oh
I
wow.
know you are talking on podcasts, or how do you earn money from that, and stuff like that. So, but that was it. That was back in 2020, and the last 4 years, I mean, we worked a lot, and we established, like a company and everything. So it was a lot of work, and we reached six figure this year. So it was a big thing.
Wow.
Thank you. And basically that was the long story short in a very, very tiny nutshell.
Well,
Wow.
then everybody can certainly understand why you would be the best person to answer today's question. So, based on your business and what you've seen out there, could your business be missing out by not being on podcasts?
Absolutely. And then that's all for the podcast. Yes. There are so many advantages to be a guest. And absolutely, because I mean, proof is in the pudding. I use it for our business as well, like getting on podcasts to get clients and to build authority and to build our brand. So absolutely. And this is the time podcast industry is still booming. I mean, it started,
Yeah.
to thrive back in 2020 when everybody started a podcast or was just thinking about it to start one. But definitely, there's a big time to start it. But it's still booming, and there's still a lot of podcasts out there, and it's just an amazing opportunity to share your knowledge, to share your story with your potential clients.
Absolutely. What I love is the fact that you recognize that it is an industry that's out there now that people can tap into, and like so many other starts of shifts in culture, many people don't take advantage because they're more observers or consumers of it, and they can't see themselves stepping into that space of authority. How for yourself did you find yourself transitioning into that kind of authority?
It was a must, actually. We had no choice because of the pandemic. From one day to another, we lost every kind of income coming in.
Oh wow.
And I mean, we have a family. I have a son. We have tuition fee to pay and stuff like that. So basically, my husband told me, so I know this guy, and he can help us to get into the podcasting business. And he just told me one day, it's like, okay, let's do it. I mean, we have no other choice. And I'm kind of a fast learner, and I love learning new things. So I was
Okay.
really into that. So I don't mind what am I doing right now, but we need to we need to earn something to continue our life here in Cyprus. So that was it. One day to another, we created a website, and boom. And okay, so let's start, cold messaging people on LinkedIn or cold emailing them.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
we started to build up our, clientele. And that was it. Wasn't like my dream to become I want a podcast booking agency one day and live happily ever after. But no, I mean, it was just an accidental thing that happened to so many people during the pandemic. But it turns out that I really enjoy this ride. I really enjoyed this journey, and it's so much more exciting what I was doing before in the past 17 years before that. So it was, and it's still exciting, and I still enjoy it. So, and then that's the whole point.
Very cool.
I love your story of pivoting, because when you talk to any of your clients, there's a relatability there. Like, you can relate to, I know what it's like starting essentially from scratch, trying to build credibility and get your name out there. And so like that's like something that you guys can relate to from a very genuine place. And so I love that about your story. I'd love to hear I'm just thinking about the other entrepreneurs who are out there who are listening to this. I would love to hear some success stories that you've grown.
Taking part in, yeah.
Absolutely. So for example, my personal success story is that I was working with a podcast host, and she is pretty amazing. She's in the business world and for many, many years. And one day basically there was some canceling on the show, and she reached out to me. It's like, okay, so do you have a client who could jump on a podcast on the interview today? And I was just thinking, it's like, oh my gosh, there's none and nobody right now who would fit the show the best way. And I told her, can I jump on the show? Can I be your guest? It's like, sure, yeah, of course, go, come on. And so I was on the call. We had an amazing conversation, and when we finished, we were in the green room, and she told me, oh, well, I love to work with you. So can you be my podcast agent? It's like, of course. I couldn't say no.
Wow.
So this is just one of the things. And she's still our client, and she's amazing. And I love working with her. And I know there were a lot of people who started to work with us. And
Yeah.
we solely worked with e-commerce entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs at the beginning. And so one of the clients, she just started to her own agency at that time when we started to work together. And now she doubled her employee number and doubled her revenue, and she's doing an amazing job. And I mean, she's so consistent and persistent doing podcast interviews in the past 4 years. And we just seen her company grown, agency grown so much. And it's just amazing to help people to get there. And I'm not saying it just because of the podcast interviews, but it can be part of a longer marketing strategy. And I think this is really powerful.
That's perfect. I love, yeah, I was gonna say, I love that you brought up the idea of a strategy about this, because I wanted to understand more of what can people, I think, or how should people start viewing getting themselves on a podcast or even starting their own? Like, what are some of the advantages that you have obviously experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're building your authority by getting on those shows, and people will see your name. And whenever they type your name or company name into Google, I mean, you pop up everywhere. I mean, this is an incredible way to build your authority. And what I also tell my clients, that getting on podcast is an amazing way to network with people, because, you know, when we're having this conversation, that's one thing, but you can always build a relationship with the podcast host even after the interview. And that's where the magic happens, because you can be in each other's masterminds or workshops or private Facebook groups, or you can start anything together basically, but it's really up to the client, up to the guest, and up to the host how you work together. So it's all about networking. This is the conversation is amazing, but then how you use it to an advantage, I mean, that's the key. That's the key thing about it. One of the key things.
That's such a good point.
This is so right on time for me, because I was just having a conversation with my mentor. Shout out Darren, if you ever watch this. We were talking about how to make use of guests, so having guests coming on and then in return being guests. And one of the things that he mentioned was just what you said. A lot of the magic happens either before or after the show, when you start to really like continue to build on those relationships and see maybe how the two of you can either work together or how you can help each other out in one area or the other. It ends up being more beneficial than I think a lot of people originally think about. I think they just think like, oh, I'm going to be on air, and get really nervous about it too, right? Like,
yes.
Oh no, am I going to look okay? Am I going to say the right things? Am I saying too many too many likes? Oh my God, I sounded like horrible.
Yeah.
You know, there's like so much of that
Yeah.
that I think it almost creates a barrier from them even get to the place where they're having the pre or the post conversation. What would you say to somebody who is in that place, who's like, I'd love to do this, Noemi, but nobody wants to see me or nobody wants to hear me? Like, I would sound awful. Like, what do you say to people who are like struggling with that part?
Obviously have to start somewhere. So when you pick podcasts, maybe just start the smaller ones. You know, you don't have to go for Tony Robbins or, you know, Meg. So it's not. So try to get on podcast. Maybe they are smaller, and also you have to practice it and rinse and repeat the whole process, because you have to get into the habit of talking, appearing in front of a camera, and you get better at it. I remember when we started, like, oh my gosh, I was so nervous. I'm not a native speaker, so, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to make all those mistakes, and everybody's looking at me like, but you just have to get through that. And once you are with on Zoom or on StreamYard with those, it's just amazing, because it's just like a human conversation between two people or three, or whomever we are together. It's a friendly conversation. And in the meantime, you share your knowledge, share your story, and everyone has a great story to share.
Yeah.
Because some
Yeah.
people think there's like, no, I don't have anything to share. Yes, you do. We all have a story to share. We just have to craft that story well before you get on those podcasts. So once you have your story, once you have great topics and talking points that can help you with the conversation, you can make magic there, and people will trust you, like you, and they'll be happy to do business with you, because they know your story and they know who you are. It's about you. It's about credibility, authority. It's about building your brand by
Yeah.
being on podcasts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to, and it's funny because I did cold calling back in the day as well, and then got into real estate. But I think about the way the world is now, with the way technology is advancing, and obviously we were all kind of there. We were also in a travel related business, and we saw a huge decline when when COVID hit, and we had to pivot as well. And just the idea of the way, to me, the world is shifting, what advertising and what branding looks like now is so different than my cold calling days, for sure, right? To reach out to somebody, I would, as somebody who's also in this, like you said, industry, this budding industry, how do you see the future, or where this, like, how big do you think this could get?
Good question.
Yeah, it's a great question, Winston. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a booming business. It's still a booming business, what I can see. And there are about 3.5 million podcasts out there.
Yeah.
So we also seen kind of a drop, when COVID stopped and officially stopped. So many people went back to work and went back to their businesses.
Yes.
And
And
so many
can they left
podcasts
their
stopped.
pages?
Yeah. Yes, yeah, absolutely. And maybe, some people didn't think it through, that running a podcast is a lot of energy, money, time, effort, consistency, persistency. And maybe we seen this trend that after 6, 7 episodes, that was the magic number. So many people stopped. It's like, oh
Wow.
my gosh, this is hard work. I don't want to do that anymore. So we've seen that a lot when we were, start researching podcasts. I mean, we do a lot of research, and it's like, oh my God, 6 episodes, episode 6, episode 7, episode 9, and that's it. So they didn't reach even 10 episodes. But those who continued, and they still going very, very strong. And what I can see now, that more and more people are doing in-person podcast interviews as well. So they just, maybe they live in the same town, and they, jump on a
Yeah,
plane
guests
again.
come in. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, I couldn't do that right now because I'm a bit far from you, like 7 hours ahead of you. But yeah, it's also possible, and I think it's still booming, and it will be around for a very, very long time. I had a podcast interview the other day, and we were talking about the power of sharing knowledge and learning through podcast interviews, even if you're a guest, even if you're a host, or when you're a listener. And this is kind of a new type of education to people,
Yeah,
because it's so easy
Absolutely.
to digest. And
Absolutely.
just then reading a book or just listening an audio book through a conversation, through a like friendly conversation, it's so much easier to get all that information.
Absolutely.
100%. I really love what you said about, you've been seeing some trends where people are doing in-person interviews now, or they're in the same place. I actually was looking, speaking of Trevor Noah, and now what with Trevor Noah and his podcast. He did an interview with a couple of people in person, and then a couple of his guests were like this, right? It was a virtual interview. And I thought to myself while watching it, isn't this interesting? It's like you get to like be a fly on the wall in someone's living room. That's kind of what it feels like when you're watching an in-person interview and they're all together and just kind of laughing. And so you can see like how they react to each other, even with like body language and certain things. And I thought to myself, we probably missed some of that. I think there's a little bit of us that misses that, like misses seeing people just kind of chop it up in a very relaxed setting on a couch. I know there was one podcast that was really famous because they would do it in a barber shop. There's a couple of them actually that do it in
Yeah,
barbershops.
that's how
Things like
LeBron's
that,
is
right?
set
Like,
up.
yeah, places where people feel comfortable to open up and to talk. And yet what I love is that it hasn't gone fully in one direction. It's just kind of opened it up to, hey, we can do this in person sometimes. And then sometimes when we're not able to, we're all now very used to the virtual interview as well.
Yes.
And it's still possible, and you still get a lot of great information from that. Okay, so one of my questions is, I'm sure people are dying to know, how do you help someone who's interested? They're like, all right, Noemi, I get it. Like, I now want to get on a podcast, but I have no clue how to even start. I heard some mention of some cold calling, but if I could get some help with this, how could you guys help with podcast connections?
Yeah, what we do basically, we help people to save time, money, and energy by helping them, because researching podcasts, it's very time consuming. So you really have to get into those places, Apple Podcast, Listen Notes, different places to find the right podcast for someone, and it takes a lot of time. And when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a coach, when you are, a healer or whomever, you don't really have time to do that, because you want to serve your clients, not just searching for podcasts. So that's when we come into the picture and help them to find those podcasts, first of all, that are right fit for their business and they're perfect mix and match. So we are like matchmaking in the podcasting world to find the right podcast for the right client, for the right person. And that's basically the first step that you have to do. And also they have to get ready with a great bio, a podcast guesting one sheet, a couple of topics and talking points to even approach a podcast host. And once you have all those, I mean, they also have to be kind of personalized, because podcast hosts nowadays podcast hosts getting like, I don't know, 50 emails or outreaches. So people, they all want to be a guest on their podcast. So yeah, you have to be prepared and stand out of the crowd, because there are a lot of people want to be guests on the same show. So getting ready, doing your research, that's what we basically do. We provide them with a done for you service. That's everything included in what we do.
Everybody can thank me later. If you have a question for Noemi, please go ahead and put it in the comments. We want to make sure that we get your answers, get your questions answered as well. Just want to put that out there.
Very cool.
There we go. So Jeannie says, such a helpful service, and it certainly does sound like matchmaking.
Yes, kind of. Yeah, we can say that. No, it was always fun. Like, we live in Cyprus in Europe, so we are like very far from you guys in the US. And when we basically got people together in Chicago, and they lived a couple of blocks away from each other, and when we got them together, a podcast host and a guest, and since then they became friends and business partners. So it was so much fun, and I really enjoyed that part, that like I can make this happen even sitting here in Cyprus, a couple of like 5,000 miles away from you. So, and we can do that. So it's fun, and it's great. I love it.
Well, that's awesome.
Absolutely. There's something you guys both touched on. I think I call it the Zoom phenomenon, because I know virtual calling and virtual business was something actually still very established before 2020. I know I had done virtual calls with cousins I had in other countries and stuff with WhatsApp and other platforms. But then with Zoom, I think it normalized this idea of talking to somebody through, well, I would say first it started more from a work function. But then obviously people recognize, hey, I can't get to my family. I got to talk to them somehow. In the same vein of where you see this growing to, because I looked at the numbers, 1 million podcasts started in 2020.
Wow.
That's the number they had. It again speaks to just when you look at this as an industry, if you think of it that way, and you're not just thinking of, a bunch of people happen to go on YouTube and post things. If you really think this is an industry and you can drive this and take advantage of it in a positive way, obviously with what you give to it, the idea to me, I really want to understand what are some of the avenues someone can earn if they're on the other side, not trying to get on a podcast to speak, but they have their own. How can they turn that into a six figure. When you said six figures, my ears perked up quite earlier. So talk to us a little bit about that, turning this into a very profitable.
Yeah, like you mean like
Being
from
a
the podcast
podcaster.
host, like a
Yeah, from the
podcast host website
yeah.
point of view. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because I get this question a lot from people. So how do a podcast host earn money? And I'm not saying it easy. And I
Okay.
know that there are a lot of podcast hosts out there, they are struggle with this because it's, yeah, you create a lot of content and it's amazing and everybody will love it. Like, yes, they will, but still how do you earn money from that? Because
Yeah.
it's not that easy. And what I realized, and we had a couple, discussions with other podcast hosts, and some people, charge, like you go on the sponsored podcast route.
Oh yeah.
To be honest, I'm not a huge fan of that, especially when it comes to like, when they're talking about thousands and the other day I got a fee from a host who said it's like 20K, and it's like, wow, I mean, that's a lot of money for a one single
To
interview.
speak
But
on a
he said
show.
it's like a package and he includes some other stuff too, but it's still a lot of money. What I
Yeah.
can see, which works for some people, like for example, you have a free option and you have a paid option. So actually
Oh, this is really good. We were about to get into some really interesting conversation. So we are going to go into overtime with Noemi to talk about this. So if you want to get in touch with Noemi, if you want to get on other podcasts, please, please, please go on her website. That's there it is right there. It's also in the description below. And you can find her on LinkedIn. Noemi Beres. You can find, that's her email. She is a real person. She will answer you, okay? That's her Instagram. So you have multiple ways to get in touch with Noemi. So please make sure you do that. If you want to hear the rest of the conversation and what we have to share, please become a Patreon member. Within like 2 minutes, we're going to be over on Patreon giving all the tea about how people are trying to make money on podcasts.
Say that, guys. Show some love to Noemi in the comments, please. This was an absolutely amazing interview.
Put a V in the comments if you found value in what she had to share today. I know, a big V for me.
Say that. All right, guys. So until we see you next time, as always, remember, you deserve the good life. Say that.
Say that.
We'll see you guys soon.